from the shores of beautiful Lake Coeur d'Alene in the heart of North Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discuss their topics on our forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum. With your host and moderator, political scientist, Tony Stewart.
We're very pleased to welcome you to today's program, and our subject today is going to deal with human rights as it relates to some activities that recently took place in Washington, D.C. at the U.S. Justice Department. Both of our guests for today's program were in attendance at that annual, should say that it's an annual meeting, but a meeting that was called in Washington, D.C., and we're going to discuss that particular event. And secondly, we're going to talk with our guest who visited the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. while they were there. I'm very pleased to welcome to the program, first of all, is Marshall Mend, who is the owner of a real estate firm in Kootenai County. He also is a member of the Board of Directors of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. He also serves on the advisory committee in the state of Idaho to the United States Civil Rights Commission. I would add that Marshall Mend was one of the original founders of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. Marshall, it's very good to have you on the program, and thank you for being with us today.
It's good to be here, Tony.
And I'm equally pleased to have Skip Cook with us. She is a former member of the board of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations, and she now represents the task force throughout Idaho on the Northwest Coalition Against Malicious Harassment Board of Directors, and she's active in many areas of human rights. Skip, welcome to the program. We're pleased to have you.
Thank you.
Both of our guests were the two individuals that visited recently in Washington, D.C., and we're so pleased they can be with us to discuss this trip. I also am very pleased to welcome to the program our regular panelist, Janelle Burke, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho, and Janelle will commence today's questioning.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you both here and talk to you about this important subject. The Justice Department is a very large department, and it has a lot of divisions and a lot of programs, and some of those have to do with civil rights. The Justice Department of the United States is highly involved in civil rights. Where does the United States Community Relations Services fit within the Justice Department? Can you tell us something about that? And either one of you can respond. Let's start with Marshall, maybe, and tell us why you went there.
Well, the title of the program was Building Peaceful Communities, and I think that that arm of the Justice Department, basically that's one of the things that they try to do, is where they have human rights problems, they try to go in there and kind of smooth things out, get people talking to each other and get them working together, and get things fixed up where everybody gets along. I think that's the program, and correct the injustices that are happening in communities.
Now, in particular, you went to receive recognition, Skip, and what was that part of the program about?
Well, the past executive director of the Northwest Coalition Against Malicious Harassment and former Coeur d'Alene, Idaho resident, Bill Wasmuth, was being honored with the National Award. And Marshall and I and Lee Slaney, Nez Perce, a woman with the affiliated tribes, was also invited, as well as Bill Wasmuth. So the four of us were guests of the U.S. Justice Department Community Relations Service to go there to their symposium. And it was an all-day series of workshops, and it was very interesting to meet with people from all over the United States who are also dealing with some of the same kind of problems we're dealing with here in our communities in the Northwest.
Let's continue a little bit further on that, Skip, and that has to do with, as you indicated, there are people from around the country, and when you have these gatherings and you're able to share notes and ideas with people across the country, what were some of the discussions about what's going on at the present time around the country? As Marshall's indicated, bringing people together. I assume that you discussed some of the positive things that are happening and also some of the problems that we have in the country. Right.
The day was broken up into panel discussions, and the first one was resolving racial conflicts. We talked about racial profiling, the police use of force, and the impact of police presence in the community, and some of the concerns around these issues. It was a very diverse group of people there, not only members from the Community Relations Service, but also people from very diverse backgrounds who, like us, work in our own communities to do what is right. There was a contingent from Jasper, Texas, that were there, and they were very interesting to listen to. The community response to the terrible murder of James Byrd Jr. Last year in Jasper, and how the community came together. It was a very tense situation, too, because the Ku Klux Klan came in the middle of all of this and tried to split and divide the community. But because the community was strong, people of different faiths and people of different races came together and kind of put up a solid wall against the Ku Klux Klan, and indeed surrounded the Byrd family with love and support. And so it was interesting that it was a terrible tragedy that happened there, but it did bring the community together, and people responded together and in strength. And it was kind of a resounding not in our town again.
It was an exciting group, too, the people that were there. They had the diversity of the types of people. There was a minister there. I think they had the chief of police there. They had a lady that owned a barbecue restaurant there. And, I mean, it was the whole community that pulled together in Jasper, and they were well deserving of the award that they received that evening.
I hear both of you saying something very, very important, that is, no community cannot guarantee that there won't be a terrible tragedy or a horrendous crime. But what a community can do is respond to denounce it and to unite. And so I hear you saying that Jasper, Texas did that. So a community can define itself by how it responds. Marshall, I'll come back to you and ask you to also talk about, as Skip has done, other individuals you met, other examples you might have that we could share on this program with how other communities deal with other questions and problems.
Well, going back to what you said before, we can't control the things that happen, but we can control our reaction to the things that happen, and that's what's real important and what we need to do in our community here and in communities around the country. Some of the other folks we met, there was just the diversity there was tremendous. We had all kinds of people. There was one lady that was in a wheelchair, and a handicapped lady, and she had a little dog with her. And her little dog, I just thought it was a little pet dog, but it wasn't a pet dog. It was her dog that would go get things for her. She couldn't move and do things, and it was a great program, and she was employed by the Justice Department there. There was a group from Los Angeles that received an award, and it was at the Human Rights Commission in the Los Angeles Human Rights Commission. In fact, one of the fellows there, this Japanese fellow, was at our first conference in Coeur d'Alene when we had our first Northwest Coalition meeting in 1987, and he was one of our keynote speakers here, and he's the director of that commission down there.
Thank you. Janelle Byrd.
Well, we've talked just a little bit about the program itself, but now a special award was handed out. And so, Skip, let's start with you. And this is a special award to someone from the Northwest, Bill Wasmuth. And so what was the award, and how was it presented?
In the evening, they had an award ceremony, and the award was given to Bill Wasmuth for his individual work, his lifetime work in human rights. And it was a beautiful award. It was the head of a bronze eagle, and that's very appropriate also coming from Idaho, with a beautiful black base to it. And it was presented by Solicitor General Seth Waxman, and Bill was quite taken and quite humbled by this. It was a beautiful evening, and it was an exciting experience to be with all these very vital people who are doing wonderful things in our country.
In a way, the recognition of Bill Wasmuth's work, Marshall, is also a recognition of all the other people in the Northwest who've worked strongly and tirelessly on behalf of human rights. Is that something that you would agree with?
Absolutely, I would agree with it 100%.
And you probably met some other very interesting people from around the United States. You told us about the woman in the wheelchair. Does someone else come to your mind that was there at the conference?
Boy, there were so many people there at the conference. It was they had people from every state at the conference, most of them from Washington, D.C. The one thing that I did notice that I think the biggest business in Washington, D.C. is security guards. And they got the sunglasses on and the little thing in their ear, and boy, they were all over the place. And when Skip mentioned the Solicitor General, I didn't know what a Solicitor General is. And I'll bet most people don't know what a Solicitor General is. But he is high up in the Attorney General's office, and I'm not sure, but I think he might be the number 2 person in the Attorney General's office, and I think he's the person that pleads the cases to the Supreme Court, if I'm not mistaken. And I know it was kind of important because he had some of those security guards with him in the black cars.
And how did you get there? Were you invited? Was this an invitation only kind of affair?
We also had to sign a pledge before we went that we would work with community relations, and actually there were quite a few pieces to that. And it's coming back and using the knowledge we gained there to build peaceful communities in our own communities and work with the Community Relations Service, and also to kind of give them the heads up if we see early warning signs, if there were problems in the community. So that was quite impressive when I was reading, and I thought, wow, we have to do all of this. If I may, though, I'd like to mention another. George Takei was there. He was Mr. Zulu in the original Star Trek series, and he spoke about the role of media and the importance of media. He said in this fall's television programs, there are 26 new programs that not one minority person is starring in any of those shows, and that this is a false representation of the United States of America, that's not what we're about. And he was quite an interesting man, wasn't he, Marshall? And Peter Yarrow from Peter, Paul, and Mary was there, and in the evening after the award ceremony entertained us with his music. And it was interesting to see people from the old civil rights movement mingling with new people, young people, and everyone coming together regardless of age or race or ethnic background or religion, all working for the common good.
Thank you very much. You stayed a little extra time, and you did something that was very powerful and very important to know about in more detail, and that is you visited the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And Skip, I want to personally thank you for bringing some documentation back. And at this time, I'm going to put up on camera, I'm simply going to hold those. We didn't have time to put them within our system. And each of these, as it comes up on the monitor, if you would describe what the museum is saying about this is documentation. We know that they are individuals who contend the Holocaust didn't happen. They're trying to rewrite history, and there's millions of people who died, and there's also millions of witnesses to this. So would you be so kind as to take us through it? And this will be our first photograph that I shall hold up here, and they'll get a close-up on camera of this. And would you tell us what is the message behind this one?
Right. This was a ship from Denmark that Danes used to rescue Jews and transport them. There were hundreds of people that were transported in ships such as this from behind the lines, people who were destined to go to ghettos, and they were rescued. And this one, like I say, is from Denmark. It was manned by the Danish resistance, and the ship is there, and it's something to see.
Thank you. Now we'll move to the next photograph, and again, we'll get a view of this, and would you describe what is being demonstrated here at the museum.
Yes, as you walk through the museum, it's quite an experience to go through. You go through in groups. And at one point, about midway, you walk through this boxcar. You enter on one side and you come out on the other side. And this is very typical of the kind of boxcars that were used to transport Jews and Poles and other people that the Nazi regime wanted to send to some of the camps, death camps. And it's something else to stand in there and look around, and you feel.
It was not a comfortable feeling when you stood in there and you just imagined this thing, that boxcar was packed with people like sardines and with one on top of another, and it was awful.
Yes. And this is also a very sad and tragic photograph, but it's important for young people in particular to be educated the fact of what a terrible Holocaust this was and what a terrible time in history. And Skip, we have this one up on the screen now.
Yes, there was a collection of 300,000 shoes from victims who were sent to gas chambers. And they have many of those in their displays. And they're scattered randomly, as you can see there, and they are very, very powerful. You see everything from a man's shoe, a dress shoe, to a laborer's shoe, to a woman's high heel dress shoe, to children's shoes, even to the smallest sizes, and it really catches you.
Mm-hmm. The picture doesn't do it justice. So seeing them in person, when you see all those shoes sitting there, and they're real shoes, and you can just basically smell the leather on them.
And it illustrates that all people of ages and backgrounds were taken to the concentration camps, and the Holocaust was that horrible situation. Here's the next photograph that Skip, you brought back.
Yeah, that's a holorith machine that the Nazis used to record information on all of their citizens. Everything was documented, and they used it to track political opponents and to enforce racial policies. And that was in a long line of other machines that were used by the Nazi government at the time in tracking people. And it was something else to see. And you think of all the names that entered that machine itself.
It's another example of why when you have a dictatorial and all-powerful government, what the tragedy is for the people within that country, or that even worldwide tragedies. Here's the next photograph, Skip.
That's a Ringelblum milk can, and it was taken out of the Warsaw Ghetto. A gentleman who was in the ghetto was collecting kind of time capsule of life in the Warsaw Ghetto, and placed it in that milk can and buried it, and hoping that someone would find it and see what actually happened in the ghetto. And it was dug up after the war, and it is there along with the materials that they found in the milk can. So it's kind of a slice of life in the ghetto.
So the gentleman
very poignant.
He was very much knowing that there would be people that would deny it, and he was bearing some evidence. So
absolutely.
It would be another piece of evidence to prove that this terrible tragedy happened. And here's our final photograph that we're going to show our viewers today.
And those are insignia that different peoples were required to sew on their clothing and wear to identify them as to what ethnic group or religious group, etc., they were to be treated as. And it was powerful to see those. Materials getting old now. The Holocaust Museum is a very powerful place to visit. I've been there probably 5 or 6 times, and it leaves you very sad, very sad. But somehow, sometimes, because these people were able to carry on in these terrible, terrible conditions, it shows you how important and powerful the human soul is, and the spirit that can rise up even above the most horrible conditions.
One final thing before we go back to Janelle. Skip, you've also brought with you tonight what is called an identification card, and each of you that visits the museum is given one of these if you wish to have one, and you can bring it with you. Would you explain this in a little more detail?
Yes, as you go in, they have a table, and you can pick up an identification card, and it is the picture and the life of a person that actually lived in Nazi Europe and their story. And some of them were freedom fighters, so to speak, resistance. Many of them were Jews who were annihilated in the death camps, just people who lived in that time and their stories.
And so this is something that you'll always keep, and it's a way of remembering that person, and other people have other identification cards to remember them. Janelle Burke.
I don't do this very often because I usually just ask questions, but I do want to tell our viewers that the Holocaust Museum is well worth visiting. We too have visited there. It's very close to the Smithsonian, so I hope if some of our viewers are planning to take a trip to Washington, D.C. or the area, that they will set aside some time, a block of time. It's not something you can do shortly, but a block of time to go there and study at the museum. It's, as I say, close to the Smithsonian's, so it's within walking distance in the general area. And you do need to get there early or make some kind of arrangements because it is a popular attraction now in Washington. A lot of people want to visit. My question has to do, Marshall, with the fact that when you go to the Holocaust Museum, you not only learn about what happened as an end result, but you learn about all the events that led up to that. And perhaps you'd like to talk about the significance of some of the loss of civil rights over the years that eventually resulted in the deeds at the very end.
Well, they were taken away, not really a little bit at a time. They were taken away a lot at a time, I think, and especially to the Jewish people, to the Gypsies, the gays.
Seventh-day Adventists.
Just anybody they didn't like, which
Jehovah's
was almost
Witnesses.
Everybody, had their rights taken away. And they had them, I think, set up in layers. The bottom of the layer, the one they didn't like the most, was the Jew. That was their number one. And I think right after that was the Gypsy, and then the gay, if you could set them up that way, and the Jehovah's Witnesses. And there wasn't too many people that they did like. And if they didn't like you and you weren't one of those things, they just made you one of those things, and they branded you that way and threw you in with the rest of them. It was, you listen to some of the stories and some of the testimonies of some of the people that they have on tape and that they have on video, and you could sit there 3 hours, you could walk through the place and kind of get an idea of what it is, but you could spend easy 2 days if you want to take and listen to some of the stories there. And these are real life stories, talked, a lot of them by the people who went through these things, who survived the Holocaust. I mean, it's, when we talk about the Holocaust deniers and the people that say it never happened, the proof is right there, and we know it happened. We can see that it happened, and here are the people who were involved in it, who were there, who are telling you that it happened and just how it happened.
And the pictures are very powerful as well. We forgot an important group, though, and that's those people who were physically and mentally handicapped.
Absolutely.
Were included among those who were part of experiments in many cases.
If you weren't physically perfect, you were out and you were used in experiments.
And the Roma Gypsy communities.
And twins, they used the ethnic twins, the Jewish twins, the Polish twins, and things like that they did terrible experiments with.
Do you have something you'd like to add there, Skip?
I'd like to tell people that the Holocaust Center admission is free, and it's kind of a good idea if you're going during the summer or a popular time during the year to call ahead and reserve a time so that you can go at that particular time and go in instead of waiting in long lines. It's very wheelchair accessible.
I might also add that if there are people who are concerned because they're taking small children, that there are exhibits that are specifically for young children so that they can learn about it in a way that would be appropriate for them at their ages. So there are some specific children's exhibits, stories for children.
Yes, and Skip, I know that you want our viewers to have an opportunity. We'll put up on the screen an address here, and now it's up on the screen, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, the Resource Center for Educators. You're very involved with trying to educate, which is so important, and that's at 100 Raoul Wallenberg Place, Southwest, Washington, D.C., 20024-2150, and it's up on the screen, too, for our viewers. Skip, would you like to elaborate a little bit upon that, why obviously education of the young people is essential for them to know what happened many years before their birth?
Absolutely. And downstairs in the Holocaust Center, there is a large room. It's a resource center for educators. And one of the reasons I wanted this up here is they have free packets of information on teaching the Holocaust in schools that is free to educators. All you have to do is contact them and request it. And it's an amazing amount of material, and they try to make it as easy as possible for educators to teach to this.
I would add how appropriate it is that the address is at 100 Raoul Wallenberg Place in Washington, D.C. Raoul Wallenberg was a tremendous hero, for those who don't know about him, to help save the lives of many Jewish people by getting them passports. He lost his freedom because of his work and was sent to what was then the Soviet Union and was never heard of again. The other footnote I'd add is that the Raoul Wallenberg Committee of the United States in New York City gave the city of Coeur d'Alene, because of the human rights work here, the Raoul Wallenberg Award a number of years ago, and it's one of the most cherished awards that hangs at City Hall, and we want to remember him because as the Swedish diplomat, he did a courageous thing that cost him his life. On that note, I have to bring the program to conclusion, but the good news for our viewers are that you'll be back next week, and we're going to talk about some other issues about organizations, not your trip to Washington, D.C., but what's going on in the Northwest and organizations you belong to and others, and we will continue that conversation on next week's program. On behalf of Janelle Burke and our staff, we thank both of you so much for being with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, as I've indicated, they will be back next week, and we hope you'll join us at that time. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum is the longest-running public television show of its type in North America and is seen in 7 states and 2 Canadian provinces. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational community outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us again at this same time next week for another new edition of North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.